Before the light had fully settled across the windowsill, his hands were already searching. Not for words, not for the newspaper, but for the mug, always the same one, wide-lipped, chipped slightly at the handle, paint worn thin from years of being chosen first. You'd hear the cupboard open, soft as a sigh, the kettle's low hush, a breath between rituals. He didn't speak much before the tea had steeped. That was never his way, but his fingers wrapped around the mug like memory itself. Slow, certain, reverent, as though his body knew what his mind hadn't found the shape for yet. He never rushed it. He'd lift the mug, inhale the rising steam like prayer, then rest it just beneath his lip without drinking, as if to say, "I'm here, let me arrive." You learned not to fill the silence, not because it was empty, but because it was full of something sacred, a kind of quiet that softened the day before it began asking anything of you. Some people begin with movement. He began with warmth, letting heat settle into his palms before words had permission to stretch. It was a kind of anchoring, a morning tether between breath, body, and memory. Sometimes he would close his eyes just for a moment, as if the mug reminded him of something older than this house, older than routine. A boy once, warming cold hands beside a pot of boiled water on a snowy kitchen floor. He never told you that story, but the steam did. In the years that followed, you came to understand. His first language wasn't speech. It was the way he held a thing gently, as though it might break or bloom depending on how you touched it. He never needed to explain himself, not out loud. His presence was made of pauses, of glances that lingered an extra second, of movements so quiet they barely disturbed the dust hanging in morning light. But the mug, it always knew. He held it like a compass, like it reminded him where he was in the world. Some mornings you'd sit across from him watching as the steam climbed slowly into the space between you. The air didn't feel empty. It felt padded, like the inside of a jewelry box lined with care. He'd lift the mug, sip once, then rest his fingers against the curve of ceramic, like it was grounding him just enough to stay still. You never asked him what he was thinking. You knew whatever it wasn't meant to be spoken right away, if at all. His silence wasn't distance, it was depth. And the mug, that small, ordinary thing, held more conversation than most people offered in a whole day. You remember once, when you came in teary-eyed from a world that had gone cold, he said nothing, just poured a second mug, placed it on the table, and waited. He let the steam speak for him, let the warmth do the holding. That was how he gave comfort, without rearranging anything, without solutions, just presence. They call it emotional regulation now, grounding techniques. But he didn't read books about that. He just knew. When words can't carry it, sometimes warmth can. And somehow, that made the silence feel less like absence and more like refuge. You knew something was different before your feet touched the floor. The house didn't hum the way it usually did. No kettle warming, no soft clink of ceramic. Only a stillness that felt too clean to be comforting. You stepped into the kitchen, and there it was. The mug. His mug. Already poured, still full, steam rising slowly as if waiting for hands that never came. It sat on the table, exactly where he always placed it. But he wasn't there. No sound from the porch, no shuffle of slippers on tile, just the cup, untouched, its heat now holding the shape of something unspoken. You stood for a long time, long enough for the steam to soften, long enough for the grief to rise with it. There was no scene, no collapse, just a room that knew he wouldn't be back in the same way. And that mug, so small, so ordinary, held the enormity of that truth. You didn't cry right then. You reached for the mug as if your fingers could absorb what he left behind. It was still warm, as though time hadn't noticed he was gone. The scent of tea hung in the air like memory. Quiet, grounding, a ritual still trying to complete itself. You thought maybe if you sat in his chair, took one sip, You could finish the morning for him, but you didn't. You let it sit. Let the cup stay full as it was, as he left it. Because some rituals aren't meant to be completed. Some are meant to be remembered exactly where they stopped. A held breath, a final pause, a steam trail that lifted like the soul of someone who always knew when to leave gently. It wasn't planned. One morning your hands moved before you could think. 2 mugs, 2 spoons, 2 quiet vessels set on the counter like they had never stopped belonging there. You knew he wasn't coming, not in body, but the ritual had grown roots. And some mornings, habit becomes a kind of prayer. You steeped both. Let the steam rise. Set one across from you where his hands used to wait. At first, it felt strange, like performing grief for an audience of no one. But over time, the gesture softened. Not a performance, a rhythm. You found yourself wrapping your fingers around the mug the way he did. Not grasping, just resting. It steadied you. The warmth in your hands became a memory held without needing to be explained. You didn't speak to the cup. You didn't have to. It was enough to sit across from that empty chair, knowing his presence lived not in the stories you retold, but in the motion your hands still remembered. You'd sip, pause, let the heat move through you like breath. And sometimes, if the day was quiet enough, you'd feel your shoulders loosen, as though something was still holding you from the other side of the silence. You weren't trying to replace him. You were remembering how to begin again without erasing what had already held you. You didn't pour 2 mugs forever, only until the ritual shifted, until the warmth belonged to you again, but never only to you, because love leaves rhythm behind. And grief, when held gently, becomes part of the furniture, not loud, just present, waiting quietly in the places our hands return to when they're not sure what else to reach for. These days, there's only 1 mug again, but the rhythm remains. Each morning, your hands reach without thinking. Cup, kettle, quiet. Steam begins to rise before you've spoken a word, and somehow, you're not alone. His absence no longer echoes sharply. It hums, soft, familiar, like the low whistle of water just before it boils. You don't sit in his chair anymore, but you glance toward it, not to search, just to acknowledge. There are mornings the mug feels heavier. Other days it feels like a hand you're still allowed to hold. You still wrap your fingers around it, as if your palms remember the way he once cupped presents before speech. And in that heat, you meet something more than memory. You meet yourself, not the version that lost him, the one that learned how to carry him without breaking. The cup doesn't have to be full anymore. Some mornings you only warm your hands, let the steam rise, close your eyes for the length of a breath, and that's enough. Because grief has settled now, not disappeared, just folded into the muscle of your daily movements. And love, the kind that knows how to wait, doesn't ask to be held tightly. It just wants to be found in the warmth we continue offering to the parts of ourselves that never stopped reaching. He doesn't visit you in dreams, but the mug is always there, a quiet presence, a small beginning, a way of saying, I'm still here, I'm still with you, and you've learned how to begin without needing to forget. Not every goodbye happens out loud. Some live inside the smallest gestures, the way your fingers curl around ceramic, the way you pause before sipping, the way silence no longer feels like absence, but memory still breathing in the room. He never needed many words, and now neither do you. The warmth still finds you, not in great waves, but in the quiet heat of a morning cup, the softened weight of being remembered by your own hands. This is what remains, the gentle rituals, the slowed moments, the way you continue showing up for someone who taught you how to listen without needing to speak. So tomorrow, if you find yourself reaching for the mug before the words, know this. It's not about what's missing, it's about what stayed, and what stays is enough.